Welcome back to the fourth session of Week 3. Today we'll explore the attempts of modernization in Korean Eastern-style painting, spanning from the late 19th century to the 1930s. We'll focus on two key areas: the influence of photography on portraiture and the modernization of landscape painting, particularly through the works of An Jung-sik and Jo Seok-jin's students. Photography's introduction to Korea in the late 19th century marked a turning point in how likeness and identity were represented. Before the advent of photography, traditional Korean portrait painting was highly symbolic, focusing on capturing the essence or moral character of the sitter, deeply rooted in Confucian ideals. However, photography challenged this paradigm by introducing unprecedented realism and accuracy. Photography, introduced to Korea in the late 19th century, provided a new method of recording likeness with unparalleled precision. This technological innovation inspired portrait painters to adopt a more meticulous and realistic approach in their works. A notable artist is Chae Yong-shin, who exemplified this shift by incorporating photographic realism into his portraits. Chae Yong-shin was a Yangban-born official who was known for his talent in portrait paintings and was even commissioned by Ko Jong to produce his royal portraits. The characteristics of Chae Yong-shin's painting style include the use of extra-fine brushes, or seppil, to meticulously depict the texture of facial skin, and the extensive use of brushstrokes to express relief, depth, and shading, no doubt influenced by his reference to photographs. Additionally, he highlighted the protruding areas of the face, such as the bridge of the nose, with white paint to create a luminous effect, and even included the reflective lights in the eyes of the sitter, further exemplifying the influence of photography in his paintings. This meticulous style marked a departure from the more flat and symbolic approaches of traditional literati portraiture, embodying a blend of traditional brushwork and modern photographic influences. Notably, when he had to depict a portrait of someone who had passed away or was far away, he used photographs as references, which proved to be a practical tool. When looking at his portrait paintings of nationalistic scholars after the signing of the Ulsa Treaty in 1905, the photographic takes on these individuals deliver a sense of immediacy in the paintings, adding to their resolve to recover national autonomy. Thus, Chae Yong-shin's works exemplify how Korean artists embrace photography not only as a practical tool for documentation, but also as an aesthetic inspiration that bridged tradition and modernity. Interestingly, Chae Yong-shin not only implemented photography into his works, but also introduced Western modes of producing and selling artworks. He introduced a family-run workshop system and implemented a fixed pricing system for his works. Chae Yong-shin even had his son run a photography studio in Jongno, Seoul, and also taught his daughter-in-law photography skills, allowing her to run a women-only studio, attesting to the artist's belief in the potential and market value of the new medium. Kim Eun-oh was also one of Korea's most notable portrait painters, celebrated for his ability to combine traditional Korean painting techniques with modern artistic sensibilities. From auditing classes in Nihonga at the Tokyo School of Fine Arts, Kim developed a deep understanding of both Korean and Japanese artistic traditions, which he fused into a unique style that emphasized precise details and realistic expression. He was known for his talent in producing realistic figure paintings and often relied on photographs as reference. He was even commissioned to produce a royal portrait of Sunjong in 1928, and used photographs of Sunjong to accurately depict the outlines and shadings of his face. His works are distinguished by their refined brushwork and vivid depiction of facial features, impacted by modern photographic portraits. Kim Eun-oh's portraiture was deeply influenced by traditional Korean portraiture methods and photography, but he also introduced subtle innovations from Japanese Nihonga that was introduced to Korea toward the 20th century. Traditional techniques such as detailed line work and an emphasis on the subject's attire and posture were central to his artworks. He also incorporated modern elements like naturalistic shading and three-dimensionality, particularly in rendering facial expressions. His portraits were also noted for their rich use of color, which heightened the visual impact while retaining a sense of realism. let's talk more about kimono in the final session of this week when we discuss the impact of Nihonga. In addition to portraiture, landscape paintings underwent significant transformation during this period, driven by the modernization of artistic practices and the influence of court painters An Jung-sik and Jo Seok-jin and their pupils. An Jung-sik, discussed in the previous lecture, was instrumental in introducing Western concepts of depth, perspective, and shading into Korean ink painting. His colleague at the Bureau of Painting, Jo Seok-jin, also worked alongside An to nurture a new generation of Eastern-style painters in Korea in the early 20th century. These younger artists and their contemporaries further developed and diversified ideas of integrating tradition with the new, paving the way for the modern era of landscape painting. One prominent figure in this movement was Lee Sang-bum, a student of An Jung-sik, who became a leading force in modern Korean landscape painting. Lee Sang-bum largely emulated the style of his teacher An Jung-sik during his time at the Seoha Misulhue and Gyeongmukdang studio, employing a hybrid technique of the southern and northern school style. However, from around 1923, he began to develop his own original compositions, placing rice fields and streams in the foreground and low mountains in the background, creating a horizontally expansive layout. His paintings also increased in size, which was a departure from traditional landscapes that would typically be produced in a moderate or small size, so that it may be rolled up or folded into an album. This composition and format was often used by the artists in works submitted to the Joseon Art Exhibition and was in adherence to Western customs of producing horizontal and panoramic landscapes. He is regarded as a representative landscape painter of early modern ink painting, who, along with the creative pursuit of traditional ink techniques, captured the unique local atmosphere of Korean mountains and rural landscapes through his distinctive brushworks and compositions. Moreover, while traditional Korean landscapes were often monochromatic, Lee employed subtle, muted colors to enhance the atmospheric quality of his works. This approach reflects his exposure to Western watercolor techniques and his desire to modernize Korean landscape painting without abandoning its philosophical roots. Another noteworthy artist is Byun Kwan-sik, whose landscapes demonstrate a similar blending of tradition and modernity. Byun Kwan-sik began his formal training in ink painting in 1917, enrolling in the Seoha Misulhue like Lee Sang-bum. Byun was a grandson of Jo Seok-jin and was greatly impacted by his grandfather's painting style. Byun went on to train in Japan from 1925, and his works displayed a hybrid of the Southern and Northern schools and the new Japanese Southern school that incorporated Western techniques. However, by the late 1920s, more distinctive characteristics began to emerge, marked by the rougher treatment of the surface and multifaceted perspectives. From 1937, when he left Seoul and traveled across the country, his focus shifted to real-life sketches, consolidating his own unique style that was founded upon direct observation and realistic depiction. At this time, he embedded in his landscape paintings of specific local sites a strong sense of regional character and nostalgia, using dry brush and splashed ink techniques with increased intensity. This was a development of a style characterized by a strong and rough atmosphere, created by the use of dark black and brown ink to create depth and layers in his works. From 1957 until his death, he mastered dry brush techniques, ink splashing, and experimented with the addition of pepper dot techniques. This period displayed more varied compositions and bold emphasis on parts of still lifes that demonstrated artistic maturity. Both Lee Sang-bum and Byun Kwan-sik represent a generation of artists who sought to modernize Korean landscape painting by integrating Western techniques to enhance spatial depth, composition, and color, while preserving the philosophical and expressive qualities of traditional Korean landscapes with Eastern aesthetics. Their works illustrate how Korean art adapted to the challenges and opportunities of modernization, resulting in a unique fusion of old and new. This change in landscape painting reflects the broader cultural and social challenges of the time, as Korea underwent similar experiences with tradition and modernity. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a period of profound transformation in Korean art, marked by the influence of photography on portraiture and the modernization of landscape painting. Artists like Chae Yong-shin and Kim Eun-ho innovated portraiture through the incorporation of photographic realism, while Lee Sang-bum and Byung Kwan-sik led the change in modernizing landscape painting. In our next and final session of the week, we will examine how Eastern-style painting in Korea was influenced by the introduction of Nihonga and Japanese taste during the colonial period.